Sandra, are you on the phone with him or did you come back?
I have sent an SMS. I don't
Oh,
have
okay.
a contact.
Oh, that's okay. All right. Well, I just put a few notes together here to get us all on the same page. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day or your night for us to meet up and talk a little bit about the global advisors. I know all of you have seen information going by about what we're trying to do with this group and how important it can be to PEI as we move forward. So just just to really set everybody at the same baseline here. So we have 5 folks who are the global advisors: Kiran, Mateo, Miriam, Inga, and Sandra or Sandy. And the advisor for the timing of the steering committee was Sandra, who's on the call. And Inga May has volunteered to become one of the coordinators for this group. So Heidi and I are part of the executive committee, and we can work with Inga to make sure that the global advisors have tasks and can move forward on them. So we're hoping that will work out. She couldn't make the call at this time, but hopefully we'll get the recording to her and she knows what she's in for. So these are the folks who signed up or were interested at the very beginning, and kind of the sorry, I'm sleepy. The time frame would be this year, and then at the end of the year we can reevaluate and see if you are still interested. So these are the people. You probably have heard that we did adopt our strategic plan, and this is the mission and the vision, so it helps us understand a little more about Polar Educators International, a vibrant network promoting polar education and research to a global community. And our vision talks a little bit more about being international, providing a deeper understanding of polar science, and we will make a point on the website to expand what we might mean by polar science and other topics, and to be trusted leaders working to inspire appreciation and knowledge of the polar regions and the connectedness to all Earth systems. So, trying to cover all of the topics and looking beyond just science to look at all humans around the globe and all cultures that might be influenced by the polar regions and are interested in it. So that's the big picture of where we're at the moment. This is a picture we came up with of what PEI looks like at the moment. So we've got our executive committee. We actually have 4 members rather than 5. The secretariat is a host organization, which is ARCUS at the moment. The council is 15 people. That includes the executive committee. Focus advisors or ambassadors are people like Janet Warburton and Dave Carlson, who have been helping out with all of their experience thus far. Global advisors is you. There's working groups that come in and out, and then the general membership, so all of our people. And we have more members now than this graph shows or this picture shows. So this is a slide, Sandra, of what you started presenting for the
Yeah.
council. Do you want to talk a little bit?
Yes. So maybe what is not on the slide is the history. Very short. Is that men during IPY there has been many people working, many projects going on in different languages, different nations. What happened? So there, has been very active. So we see that it works very well. IPY and Sandra can join. That's Sandy. That feeling, it has been performed by many nations. After so many years now, what we see is that we still have very active people, but what we see also is that it's only the few people that are really having English as um, a language that is very useful in their own country, and people who teachers, for example, who can speak and listen very well in English, there's no problem. They do connect to IPOI and they stay, or to Polar Education and Science, they stay connected. But the full bunch of people behind, I'm talking here especially, for example, for Italy, we have, for example, Matteo, we have Carlo, we have a few people, we have Maddalena, but then there is a few hundreds of teachers that are interested in polar science, that are performing polar science education, but they cannot reach the whole thing. So what happens is that the burden comes to a few people. It's good that they are treated some kind as kind of polar ambassador, which is, for example, in Matteo, but they cannot do all. They cannot just. It would be easier that the Polar Educators International can reach these people much easier. How? We still have to talk about that. It's a long-term work. This is only language, but another thing is, if we go down, for example, it's a pity Kiran is not here, but if you go to India, also there's quite some polar education, but you don't hear anything about that because one, language is maybe even less difficult there. English is pretty, I think, pretty well used there. But the thing is that there, the curriculum is different. The way they teach
Mhm.
about polar sciences is different. It's another mentality. And this type of thing, so language and mentality, that is the approach that we want to reach. That is the questions that are here now on screen. What does it really mean to be a global organization? What do we want? What do we want to reach from Polar Educators International? Why do we need a committee like the Global Advisors? What can we do? And what suggestions are there to have such a kind of global organization? That is behind the three questions that are on screen. Is that okay?
Yeah. Um, and then we asked those questions of global advisors. Sandra, maybe last summer we sent out a couple
Yeah,
questions.
that is 1 year ago, and then we saw a couple of things that actually the question that we sent around, we had already our ideas before. We thought it's it's gonna be pretty much this or this, but we still wanted to hear it from the public, and the major things that came is that yes, this is, I think the first point came from Kiran. He
Yeah.
wants really the culture to be included in the global issue, in the global terminology, and working engage with audience across geographies. That means that we are not going to work only local, and that is maybe more language related. So we want to use all continents, all sensitivities, culture-wise, language-wise, include everybody. And I have the external review of the process. Yeah, that is the membership. I don't know anymore who has written this last point, but they want some eye on a process, and it could have come from Kiran as well, because he, in one of his early messages, he said we should do kind of audits, a kind of feedback already from the beginning. Start with initial questions. What is it about now, Polar Educators International? Some kind of we start with some kind of statistics, if you can say like this. We have so many countries, so many languages. We have so many geographical different places, so cultural related then. And if we do a kind of feedback once a year, or once the time frame has not been set up, but with a regular interval, if we re-look at it, are we really working through our cultural, through our global inclusivity? Are the inclusivity, are we really doing well? And that is what is said in the last sentence here. So we have to have a process, and Polar Educators International, the membership, should have an external view on that, and it should be external reviewed as well by people who, I think, by that's my personal thing, by projects that have already some kind of expertise in this, if they are existing, because we have to find out already which kind of projects do have such kind of inclusivity. Yeah. Okay, I'm finished.
That was perfect. Thank you. I could not have said it as well, that's for sure.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
um, yeah, so it was not only Kiran, but also Inga was talking about
Yeah.
having this evaluation from the very beginning. And I think that that would be really important for us to make sure, when the council or executive committee is making actions or doing drafts of ideas, to make sure that the global advisors are they know what it means to be a global organization and what the parameters or important pieces are, and how to accomplish those or to make recommendations for how we can operate. I really think, and the executive committee mentioned in their meeting in June, that we think this is probably one of the most unique uh, aspects of Polar Educators International, to have this from the very beginning and to make sure that we follow through on what we say we want to be. And time and again, I hear that it's hard to be an international organization in truth. And that just makes me want to be even better than they think we can be. So we'll see how this goes. From the feedback that we got, the council, you don't have to read this whole thing right now, but the steering committee took your suggestions and tried to make a charter, or the responsibilities, or how it is that a global advisors group works. We included the external review piece, all kind of called the global impact audit, given that Kiran's name for it. And this is really, really basic. Hopefully, we will meet every 2 months. And it's a very basic outline of what it means to be a member of the Global Advisors. So I can resend this to people if that's helpful. Um, and moving forward, so from what the steering committee tried to put together and where we want to go next. Again, Inga May said she'd like to help as coordinator with help from Heidi and Sarah. And then what we would really like is a review from our uh, global advisors on the strategic plan. So it's been voted on by the council, but I think recommendations and comments from the global advisors, who don't vote but are able to give advice without sort of feeling ostracized by that advice. It's very, very valuable. So that would be really helpful. A list of organizations we should partner with or work with internationally is really important. Feedback as we're developing the website. There's lots of discussion about how to incorporate different languages and, as you said, different ways of teaching polar education, and the impact audit that I mentioned. So those are the ideas. And Heidi, if you want to unmute yourself, I see you have a question.
Yeah, this is more just in the comment of evaluation, like external review slash evaluation. I think we're using those words interchangeably. Um, I think about inclusivity, which I think maybe goes beyond just language inclusivity, but as an organization being inclusive. So how do we establish a metric or a framework for ourselves as an organization that we can then use as a assessment tool, so that we can actually then, instead of qualitatively saying, well, we have 24 member countries, we must be inclusive, to say something more of in this calendar year, PEI has added this many more members from this many countries, or like how do we? I mean, do we have a framework, or is that something that we need to think about, and who would
Mhm.
do that, and does it need to
There,
really be external? Like, I guess there, yeah.
yep.
Anyway, maybe it's in the
So
science.
we don't have this yet at all. Oh, I'm hearing my feedback. Um, so we don't have this at all, and I think this would be a project developed by the global advisors and the review conducted by them of the organization. So I think you all have the ability to be able to look at the organization and say, uh, is it being what we set out to be? So no, it's not set up yet, but maybe at this point, Sandy, can I ask you, does this resonate with the work that you've been doing? What does it look like to you?
Well, it does. The work that I've been doing does have some things that we could look at that might give some ideas. But what came to my mind when you were talking is the question about what you actually are trying to evaluate. Because if you're talking about numbers of people involved, that's one thing. But if you're looking at not so much how many people are involved, but actually what they've been doing and how effective it is really a different question.
Yep.
And so I think we need to
Yeah.
consider that, because it's really hard to look at what the impact is. It's easy to count numbers, but
It looks like, I mean,
that
I
I don't
think
think
we
it's
all
going to.
agreed to go beyond that. Yes. So I know it, and it is an amazing amount of work, but is there a way that we can put something together that measures more than just those numbers? I think is, and the steering committee didn't come up with the idea yet. That's which is like I see this as a big, big, amazing project that our global advisors can do year after year. And Heidi's asking, but how? And that's exactly sort of the task I want to put out there to the global advisors. It wouldn't happen overnight and could take 2 years to set up, but that's the thought. Heidi's asking, is there an existing framework in the social sciences?
I think you're looking at qualitative research for this more than quantitative. I think it would be almost impossible to get a real quantitative.
Right, but that's what social scientists do. They do qualitative surveys that
Well, they
are
do both,
structured
but I
in
mean,
such a way that
yeah.
you can actually arrive at an answer without having it be circular, so that we ask the right questions or set up the metric in a way that the answers we don't get are what we wanted to hear, in essence. Because it's really easy to ask questions and then have them structured in a way so that you get the right feedback. So like there's a whole science behind how you get qualitative information from people that actually can fit into some sort of metric and be meaningful, as opposed to circular logic. So like, could we get a social scientist involved, or like turn this into, like, I see this as having so much potential, like a project for a student, or I don't know, something, it could be really cool. And there might be something already out there.
And Sandy, can you give us a rundown of what your uh, research has been, so we're all clear on what you have done?
Yeah, I could do that. Could I show you a few slides that would make it easier
Yes.
probably to put it in context?
Yep, I think I can do that. Let me see. I think I've made you a presenter. And are you able to
Okay.
show your screen?
Yeah, let me try this and see. All right, I put show my screen. Do you see my screen that says go to meeting, install meeting?
Yes.
Okay, then I'll pull up, let me just pull up a PowerPoint and I'll do the other one. Impacts of language. Can you see that?
I see sharing our planet. Oh, impacts of language, yes.
Okay. I won't go through all of this because this is actually kind of a blend of a couple of presentations I just did at the World Environmental Education Congress. But if I flip down through, you know, we know about the IPY EOC community. That's what I was looking at in the first part of the research, was how well that worked. And the fact that we had about 750 people from 30 different countries involved in that. But the fact was that we did almost everything in English. So this part is really looking at the language and how that affected the decisions we made about what we wanted to do, and how it influenced people's decisions about whether or not they wanted to participate. So that's what I was looking at in the first part of it. And this is in 2 languages, by the way, because it was a multilingual conference I was at, and they wanted it in 2 languages. So that's why the Spanish is in there, if you were wondering. So I started out by doing interviews, and I did it with some of you who are on the call, Miriam and Sandra and some others. And so far I've talked with 61 people from 22 countries. I started with the official committee and with working group members, and then used what they call snowball sampling. So someone I would talk to say, well, this person was really active in my country, he'd be a good person to talk to, and so I talked to that person as well. Also did some focus groups and some written surveys. And those were focused really on the impacts of language on the activities they did during IPY, as well as, you know, what they saw as being positive and negative about using English for international communication, how they thought it could be improved, and the importance of, is it important to have multilingual programs and materials. So these are the countries that were represented in one of those ways through these interviews or focus groups or surveys. And out of those, 4 countries got involved in a school program where we tried to link the students up. And Miriam could comment on this because she was one of them, one of the classes. So we called it Sharing Our Planet, and we were having the kids, or trying to have the kids in these 4 different countries, which went from 64 degrees north to 53 degrees south, sharing ideas about their environment. And so we had 5 different language groups involved in this, and trying to get them to understand their environment better, take action, learn about their social responsibility, what does it mean to be a global citizen, and develop personal skills like languages and like computer skills. That was the overall goal. On both of those things, the preliminary, and they're just preliminary findings, some of the things was with the committee, IPY committee and working group members meetings, although people agreed that yes, the committee and the working groups worked quite well generally, they still agreed that native English speakers had more influence on the process and on the activities that were chosen than the non-native speakers. Why was a little more, there was a little more difference of opinion about that. Part of it was that they felt there were just more native English speakers. And this one I think is interesting because you could look at that as being a cause or an effect. It may have been that there were more English speakers because we did everything in English. And also, of course, the paid staff were all native English speakers. And then it was also felt that people from native English-speaking countries tended to be more direct. And the pace of the meetings favored them. And it was pointed out by a number of non-native speakers that they felt in meetings like this, they had to prove themselves first before people would actually take them seriously. Other things that were found was that people that weren't comfortable in English really weren't greatly involved at the international level. That's with the exception of the few people that were key members of the committee or the working groups. But it went even farther because it was pointed out that people who were not native English speakers, even though they may have been experts in the topic, weren't asked to serve on the committee. So another thing was that if they weren't comfortable speaking English, they just didn't take part in the working groups. And also that if they couldn't read English, they didn't have much access to materials that we prepared, the international groups prepared. Even if we had flyers translated into other languages, they had problems with the access of how to find those materials and how to use the materials. So I think that's something to keep in mind. Won't bother with this. This is fairly common sense about what people saw as the positives. Basically, it's very pragmatic. Although the one that surprised me was being told by so many people from so many different language groups that English is an easy language to learn. They felt it was easier than their own language in some cases. The negatives, again, are pretty much what you would expect about how it excludes people. Learning English is expensive was one that came out from South America from almost everyone I talked to, but not from any of the other countries. And in terms of the researchers, and another thing that sort of has educational ramification is not only did they felt it limited their ability to get funding and publish and things like that, was this one, that they found that it could be difficult to talk about their science to people within their own country because they had done all their research in English and they didn't know the terms in their own language to explain it. And I think this is one that we need to pay attention to when we're trying to do international education. Some of the general perceptions were just that it's all intertwined. You've already said that. And that English is essential for high levels of international communication, and computers can help. But again, on the education level, that the native language was equally, if not more important in national and regional contexts, like schools and museums. And one of the things that the challenges with this project we did sharing our planet with the schools, and Miriam, if you can have any comments on this, please let us know. But just looking at the language, and there were a lot of other challenges as well, but some of the ways that we addressed some of the language issues was that we provided focus questions and some written materials in the native languages for each of the schools. And then the students did their initial group work in their native language. And I am giving the perspective mostly from Greenland because that's where I was when most of this was happening. And then after doing it, then they put it together in an English format, and the teachers served as interpreters or translators during web conferences or Skype calls. Now here we're still assuming that the teachers in these cases had the English skills to do it. But also we found that students who had greater English skills helped the other students, and they also served as presenters. And this was not only during web conferences, but also when we did emails or when we posted things on Edmodo, which was the program we used. And in Greenland, it was incorporated into English classes and also actually into Danish classes. And the teachers and the students did use free online translation programs. In one school in Chile, the teacher did not speak any English, and so Melissa, the teacher in Greenland, would correspond with Teresita, and they just would do it in their own language, and then they would plug it into Google Translate or Babylon and get the idea of what the other one was saying and then answer in their own language. So those were some of the approaches that we used. And some suggestions that have come out from this and from the other interviews was really the important role of scientists, that we need to get the scientists involved because they need to serve as translators, and that was meant, we always talk about they need to be translators to make it from scientific language into language that the public or teachers or students can use, but also that we can look to them or try to look to them to do some translating from English into their native languages. tough call because they're very, very busy, but we can probably find some that could do that. And this one's a pipe dream maybe, but the idea that if we could encourage science to be taught bilingually, both in the native language and English, that can work towards filling both of those gaps, the gap where the scientists can't explain their work in their native language and also where the students and teachers don't speak the English. And I think it's really important for those of us in Australia and the US in particular to look at trying to encourage other languages being taught. Then this one came out a lot, and this came out not only from the interviews but from my own experience spending the time in these countries where I was the one who didn't speak the language or didn't speak it well. Is we're all aware on some level that we need to be careful and use special techniques to communicate with people who are not native speakers, but we don't necessarily follow our own principles. So those kinds of suggestions came out from people about ways that they would be able to help communicate across these languages. And finally, the idea of establishing a common ground and working from there. And we found that worked with the students in the classes once we figured out that weather was of interest to them. The students wanted to know each other as people first. They weren't really all that interested about sharing ideas about their environment at the beginning. But when they started talking about weather, like how hot does it get where you live, how cold does it get where you live, and the Greenland students were reading things that the Malaysians had put together, and they were just amazed. And so that got them started talking a bit more about the environment by starting with the weather. And finally, I think it's really important to get them to question their ideas about what is normal. We found that with the students in Greenland and with the ones in Malaysia, that the Greenland students started out wanting to say, well, we live a normal life just like you do. And we're saying they were planning to put this out to talk to Miriam's students in Brazil, and the teacher asked them, well, do you know what is normal for them? And they didn't. So they changed it. Well, we live just about like you do. And I said to them, do you know how they live? And they said, no. So those kinds of things, once they had to start figuring out what is normal, even for simple concepts like hot and cold or rainy and dry, after that broke the ice, and then they got started being able to share a little more. And then, unfortunately, we ran out of time before we could get too much farther on it. But anyway, that is basically the kinds of things that we've been looking at. And I don't know, Miriam, if you would agree with this, but one of the biggest problems that we had less to do with language and more to do with technology. And that was getting the technology to actually work when we wanted to have web conferences or Skype calls or things like that. And a lot of times, sometimes it was related to technology and weather, where one school or the other would be flooded out or the power was off or something like that. But that was probably our biggest challenge. And that's about it. Oh, this was a survey that I had tried to do for the conference, the World Environmental Education Congress conference. And I had it in 3 languages. Unfortunately, I got 0 responses. So I wouldn't call that a success. But speaking of that, this survey, I could modify it, and it's paid for until the 25th, so it's paid for about another week and a half. If you think that there's any way we could use it for the group of people that you have on the Polar Educators we can take a look at it and see what questions you might like to add or change or things like that and send it out. And if we wanted to keep it for an extra month, it's not that expensive. It costs around 25 Australian dollars for a month. So that's it.
I just want to say that's amazing. Forgive my ignorance before. I had no idea. It sounds like we already have our pro on the call. So it's awesome. I'm over the moon about this stuff. I think it's so cool and just so important. And that clearly just highlights, what we need to be doing and really argues for the importance of really setting PEI up well and making sure that we're sort of setting the next step off of IPY and really taking this to heart. So it's awesome. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and looking at the comments that people put in while I was talking, I definitely agree with what Miriam said, and I didn't put this in because I was just focusing mostly on language here, but the school syllabus and the school calendars are also an issue that needs to be looked at. And so I think that takes getting people who are familiar with the syllabus in a certain country to look at it and see where we could fit this in. And I'd like to make just one last comment about this conference that I went to, this World Environmental Education Conference, that when I spoke to people there and they asked me what I was doing, and I said, well, I've been working with polar research and polar education, the first response I got from almost everybody was, with what? And so I'd say, yeah, polar things like the Arctic and the Antarctic. And their second comment was, so you're not really in environmental education then. And I think that just gives us an idea of how far we have to go.
Yeah, it's a lot. It is. I and I think we can probably build upon what you've done, Sandy, and I can only imagine over the time of your work you've come up with new questions or other questions, and and perhaps we can begin to devise the very beginnings of perhaps looking at those suggestions that were made. Those look like really good like starting parameters for what we want PEI to be held to in terms of our global philosophy is kind of the words we've been using for it. How we're going to operate as a truly global organization. What does it mean? And how can we judge ourselves on those qualities? And perhaps we can start with those suggestions and look at what it will take to get there, and and then look back on it every year or every 2 years to find out how far we've come, and where we and what the recommendations are for getting better at it.
Yeah, I would agree that that's important.
So basically, this is the biggest conversation for uh, the global advisors. And I mean, it can start with looking at the strategic plan that we came up with and having those like detailed recommendations that say, like, this will work, or it will only work if you make sure you do it this way, or whatever. I can't think through all the possibilities, but to have this group and your eyes on this kind of a project on PEI is going to be really helpful. And I guess, yeah, and this is where I don't want to be the guide. I want to say, you all, I think, can do this on your own. I think you can put this together if we're interested in doing it. So we don't have to come up with all the answers tonight or this morning or whatever time it is where you are. But I think it's a start. And um, yeah, I think once Inga May kind of sees where we're coming from, she might be able to help us get moved forward. Or Sandy, if you have ideas or where we want to take this, or Miriam or Sandra.
Now, if it would be helpful to you at all, I have the I did at the conference, I did two presentations actually. I did one that was strictly on first on the IPY part, and then I did one on the school program. If either of those presentations would be helpful for you, I could put them into a Dropbox so that people could access them, but I don't want them spread far and wide because they have pictures of kids in them and things like that. But for the
Right.
use of the advisors group, if you just think it would be helpful to have that list, or I could just send you the Word document that's basically the script behind it, kind of the words about it, which might be easier. I'm happy to do that if anyone wants it.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of how. So what? Yeah. How would we utilize it? Or I'm trying to think of how we would utilize it if you weren't the guide, sort of guiding us through it, because this was really helpful to hear your words.
Mm-hmm.
I think the information is really handy to maybe have, I mean, within our own little group, even if it serves as a document to return to for some of the fundamentals of what the need is. And I don't know, I think it might be like I could find it helpful returning back to it if I were trying to articulate um, sort of trying to define the role of PEI as we move forward and how we might do that. I could probably use to just to look over again at those results because they're really poignant and I think they're give us some really clear directions.
Okay, well, I'm happy to send out, as I say, maybe the easiest thing would be just a Word script instead of the PowerPoint, because that would have the wording in it and the ideas in it, and you know.
You could save it as a PDF, the PowerPoint.
I could, except that the way I've got it set up, a number of them would be on top of each other,
Oh, okay.
if you know what I mean, when you put an
Yep.
animation in.
Yeah.
I'll try that. I'll see what I can do. Do we have a special email list just for the global advisors?
Yes, we do. And it sort of can operate from your own email inbox, or it can come from the Polar Educators at Gmail account as well.
Yeah, I just wondered if I get an email coming from Polar Educators and I do a reply, is it going out to everybody or is it just going out to the...
No, it would. It won't. Polar Educators at Gmail just goes to the one account. We don't have like an automatic feed to the entire email list anyway, so it's not really
Oh,
possible.
okay.
Yeah. So it
Okay.
can be just for global advisors. And, you know, that is just the people who have been on this email chain about this meeting too, which makes it pretty easy.
Okay.
So it's been a good 40 minutes already of just explaining where we're at and where we could possibly go. Sandra, go ahead if you want to talk.
Yeah, I have to. Don't know how the system works. Do you hear me all?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I was wondering, but that is already maybe it's covered by what you are going to say, Sarah. I was wondering, what are we doing now? So we are going to work as global advisors all together now. But what we do for the membership towards that, because it has been quite some time, um, they it's for them important that they know that we are working on that. And I was wondering, how do we do it? Do we remake a questionnaire? But I don't think it's the right thing now, because we will overload with the same kind of work again. Or do we just summarize what we have been, the early summaries, it's very early things that we have, and ask maybe the membership to give comments on that, or to even advise for maybe we overlooked some questions that they thought it would have been important, so that in the future we can see. I've seen also the program assessments appearing in the whole thing here in the discussion. If we can do some kind of assessment there, how can we improve? And that by doing now, my basic question is actually, what do we do for the membership now? Because if we start to work on our own, in our own global advisors group, it will take time, I think, before we come up with something decently. Am I right? Am I wrong?
Yeah. And that, through the steering committee side, it was almost frustrating because we want to make sure that everything is done well and given the process time, but also to make sure the membership knows that we're doing something. I think after this meeting, and hopefully we get the recording out to the other global advisors, there is an understanding of perhaps the the possibilities of the directions that the global advisors can go in. And I would suggest to you as a group to begin defining what it is to really be part of this group. And maybe it is like I was just typing in the text box, that we don't have a public document that explains what global advisors are. And there's nothing to follow that we have in place. And so here is a chance for this group to start defining what it means for PEI to be a global organization. And that would actually be a very useful set of information for our website. So when people come to it and say, well, this is all in English, or whatever happens, we can say it is right now, but this is what we're trying to do, and this is where we're going. And yeah, so that's my thought, is just that the global advisors need to start defining themselves, and that can go to the public.
I just wrote it, Sarah. I think it's a great idea, because this will indeed give also a picture to the people what we want, or what we like, what we dream of, and then they can join the dream and help us as well by dreaming and
And
sleeping.
sleeping.
Miriam,
I
she
think
fell
that
asleep.
she's listening. I think that, yeah, I think that it's started. I think there is a beginning of information from the 3 or 4 people who sent us, answers to those questions that we showed earlier. And also from the suggestions and the work that's been done by Sandy. I think there is a lot to start with. And so I'm just suggesting a next step might be to make sure that we have this kind of presentation available to the other global advisors, and put out there that we want a 1-page or 2-page piece of information and next steps for the global advisors. And that may be 6 months worth of time, not a quick turnaround for information, but
I have something comes up in my mind also when I look back to Portugal. I have to say the people were extremely open to the whole thing, the whole questionnaire thing. The sad thing was that we didn't have time. It was the typical Portuguese way of organizing, so we had to each time it was settled, there was another reason why it couldn't be. So we had here in Flanders, we say we had to do it between soup and potatoes, really very quick and try to reach the people. But it was amazing how people came to me all the time throughout the whole workshop to try to talk about this and to get bits and pieces together. And it was very successful. And I would, so one thing I really would advise is that to any meeting where there's, of course, many of you are English speaking, so you don't have that particular issue. But if we have people who are working, who are going to be in an event, try to do this kind of presentation or questionnaire. Actually, the questionnaire, we didn't have time for doing that during the workshop, but I gave the presentation and we were talking a lot during lunch times, during breaks and so on. And that is the thing I think we have to, that's the way how we can spread. Portugal was an excellent way because there you have this kind of people who were not able, there were many who were able to go to join IPY, but there were the majority there of Portuguese, I would say, were not able to join. And if you can reach that people, it's extremely useful. So I would say just try to spread the word in these events. Take it as a luggage with you all the time. When we do events, we have to promote the people if they go. Maybe we have to give some initial small things, slides, so that they can use, they can, even if it's only just a folder, a flyer or whatever, but that they can talk about it during the time that they are in the events. That's it.
Good. I think this is a lot of ideas, and again, maybe we take time to think it through, and just really start defining who the global advisors are, I guess, as a group.
Mm-hmm.
Does that work for now? I feel like, is that enough enough information for one sitting?
That is good for me. I enjoyed this meeting.
Yeah, I think that it was good, and I think we probably should let Miriam go and get some sleep,
Yep.
given what time it is for her.
Yep. Okay. Well, we will make sure that this presentation gets to Matteo and Kiran and Inga, and then Heidi is working on notes. You're fine, Miriam. The sun must be coming up now. And really enjoying it. You know, it's just barely getting dark here in Alaska. I'm surprised.
Already?
Not quite. It's cloudy day.
No, not already. Oh gosh.
Okay.
Yes.
I think there is
next
plenty.
week I'll see Matteo, so I will have some time with him in
Okay.
Italy. So I will tell all about this. He'll be happy to hear.
Okay.
He's too busy with the museum
Yes.
is opening, so I guess he's overloaded.
Send him our love and congratulations.
Yeah, I will do so.
All right. So I guess we will let us all go to sleep or enjoy your day, and we will talk soon.
Thanks so much, Sarah. You do a great job. And all the others as well. Huh?
Thanks.
Yeah, this was
but
good.
the others are so silent. So thank you, everybody.
Miriam, for coming.
All right, thanks.
We'll talk soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.